Okay, so with our Bipap settings, the first one you're going to see on our vent is Ipap. That is the inspiratory positive airway pressure. So that is the air or the pressure that we are giving when the patient is breathing in. Epap, so this is going to be the higher of the two numbers. Epap is the expiratory positive airway pressure. So that is the pressure we're giving when the patient is exhaling. And here, this is the big difference with Bipap versus CPAP. So Bipap, we have two pressures. CPAP, one continuous pressure. You'll have to excuse my handwriting. I'm left-handed. It's a dry erase board. These weren't meant for lefties. So you get, with Bipap, the Ipap and the Epap. CPAP's one continuous one. And getting into this is why this is beneficial for our patients who are out of breath. They are breathing hard, they're tired. You see them tripoding, pursed lip breathing, the accessory muscle usage, their neck sucking in, they look exhausted. So think about it. With CPAP, if we're doing this one and this patient's tired, we're helping them, but with one continuous pressure at all times, we are going to tire them out eventually. With this, so when it comes to our respiratory patients, let's get rid of that guy. We're not even worried about him anymore. What we're concerned with is this one. So you end up getting a higher pressure this way, and you're still giving them pressure when they're exhaling, just like with CPAP, but it's a lower number, so it's easier for them to breathe against. So these patients are, like I said, they're really struggling. They're really struggling, and they're tired. So this is going to wear them out quicker than this will. So generally, with your CPAP settings, what you get is 5, 7.5, and 10 with the pulmodines. With this, you can make it whatever you want. So per protocol, we're supposed to start at 10 over 5. IPAP of 10, EPAP of 5. This, sometimes you do have to change this, because if you have a severely short of breath patient who's in severe respiratory distress, this is going to make it worse. The highest I've ever had to start is 15 over 8. That was the highest I've ever had to start. And this is how you say that. When you call report, IPAP, you say, I've got them on Bipap, 15 over 8 in your FiO2 percentage. Your FiO2, just like CPAP, is your percent of O2 being delivered to the patient. There's another benefit. As we know, most of these patients live in a hypercapnic state. We don't have to use nearly as much O2 with this. And the reason for that is because, once again, the two different pressures. You're giving them a higher pressure gradient here and a lower one here. So this is allowing them to fully relax when they take that exhale. And the best thing about this is, a lot of times, like I said, I'll start my patients off at 10 over 5 or 12 over 6. And that's just my personal preference of how I like to change my intervals. I like to change my IPAPs by 2 and my EPAPs by 1. And I generally like to start my FiO2 off at 60%. But this is all dependent on the patient. You may have to start higher. It's all dependent on what the patient's got going on. I'm going to tell you, if your patient has a silent chest, you're going to need to start higher than these two numbers. But once again, what we're seeing here is when that patient is breathing in, we're getting a higher number. When they're breathing out, we're at a lower number. This is, remember, all these are fancy words for pressure. What is pressure? Nothing more than PEEP. And we know hemodynamically, we breathe at a PEEP of 5 generally. So these are just fancy words for pressure. Pressure equals PEEP. So don't get intimidated by that right there. Don't get intimidated by this, because that is pressure. And all pressure is something we're all familiar with, and that's PEEP. Essentially what you're doing here is giving them 2 levels of pressure. That's all this is your 2 levels of pressure. (10/5). Like I said, when you call report to the hospital, all you got to tell them is, I have a patient on Bipap, 12/6, FiO2 60%. And they'll know exactly what you mean. And they'll have respiratory waiting on you. And when you go and give respiratory the report, that's what you tell them. 12/6, FiO2 60%. Now, there are a lot of troubleshooting things with the vent, and we'll go through some of them when I go over and get the vent in the second video that I'm going to do. Right now I'm at the firehouse because I don't have a whiteboard at the ambulance base. So we'll go over some troubleshooting things with the actual vent. Also, Zol's got some great videos on YouTube that I would recommend pulling up. And if any of this is still complicated, please call me. But once again, we're going to hit it one more time. Your Ipap is your inspiratory positive airway pressure. Your Epap is your expiratory positive airway pressure. So patient's breathing out, the patient's breathing in. You're giving them a pressure of 10, and you're giving them a pressure of 5. And remember, what's this? These are just fancy words for pressure, and pressure is just a fancy word for PEEP. Don't get intimidated by all of this. This is just a better way of, this is just better than CPAP, because you're allowing that patient to relax when they're breathing out. You're still giving them pressure, but it's not a constant, because if you think we're giving the patient 10 and 5, well, we would have to turn that to 10 on CPAP. That's going to wear your patient out at the end of the day. What we're doing here is we're still giving them pressure, but a much lower pressure that allows them to still get that open, help stent those airways open, help hold them open, but the patient can still exhale and relax. Like I said, second part, or the second video, I'm going to go over to the ambulance and I'm going to show you how to get into all these settings on the vent, and some troubleshooting stuff to do, as well as some setting changes you can make and some common alarm settings. So yeah, if you have any questions on this, please feel free to contact me, and I will happily sit down and break it down with you in person. Once you start using Bipap, CPAP is crap. I promise you. CPAP will be out when you start figuring out Bipap. Once again, if you have any questions, please get a hold of me and we can do this all in person. But right now, this is just the easiest way for me to distribute this information out to a large group of people without having to get an actual class together.